Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Have you ever been in a situation where someone makes a joke that crosses the line, but you can't walk away? Maybe it's a client who pays you well, or a coworker you have to see every single day. You want to speak up, but you're afraid of losing your job, your contract, or making things incredibly awkward. It's called quiet harassment, and it is one of the hardest professional situations to navigate. In today's story, we're going to follow Maya as she faces this exact challenge. You'll learn how she sets a firm boundary without losing her biggest client. And more importantly, you're going to learn the exact English phrases, idioms, and professional vocabulary you need to stand up for yourself with confidence. Make sure to grab a notebook because we have a lot of great expressions to cover today. Let's get started with Chapter 1. Maya stood in the lobby of the company, her heart hammering against her ribs. She smoothed down her blazer, taking a slow, deep breath. Today was the day. For months, her small marketing agency had survived on local, low-budget gigs, but this was the big league. The company was a giant, and landing this contract would be a massive game changer. "Maya, Harrison will see you now," the receptionist said with a polite smile. Maya nodded, gathering her notes. She walked into a sleek, glass-walled conference room with a stunning view of the city skyline. At the end of the long mahogany table sat Harrison, the company's charismatic but intimidating chief executive. He didn't stand up, but he offered a warm, confident smile. "Ah, Maya, the creative genius," Harrison said, gesturing to a chair. "I've heard great things. Let's see if your pitch matches the hype." The stakes were incredibly high. Maya's hands shook slightly as she connected her laptop to the projector, but the moment she began to speak, her nervousness melted away. She walked Harrison through her strategy, explaining how she would rebuild their brand from the ground up. She spoke with passion, backing up her ideas with solid data. Harrison listened intently, occasionally nodding. When she finished, a tense silence filled the room. Finally, Harrison smiled and stood up, offering his hand. "Impressive," he said, his grip firm. "You've got yourself a deal, Maya. Let's see what you can do." Maya walked out of the building floating on air. She had done it. She had landed the golden pitch. 2 weeks into the project, Maya felt like she was finally finding her rhythm. The work was demanding, but her marketing strategies were already showing promising results. She walked into the conference room for their weekly status update, feeling prepared and confident. Harrison was already sitting there, scrolling through his tablet. As Maya sat down, he looked up and let his eyes linger on her for a moment too long. "Well, look at you," Harrison said, leaning back in his leather chair with a slow smile. "If I knew my consultants were going to look this good, I would have hired your agency a year ago." Maya froze, her hand hovering over her laptop mouse. A sudden wave of heat rushed to her face. It was a compliment, she told herself, but the tone felt entirely too familiar. "Thank you, Harrison," said Maya, her voice tight as she forced a polite, nervous laugh. She immediately opened her presentation slide, trying to steer the focus back to the safe ground of data. "I have the weekly traffic reports ready for you here." Harrison waved his hand dismissively, though his smile remained. "Don't worry so much about the numbers right now, Maya. Relax a little. I like a woman who knows how to have a good time, not just work herself to death." Maya swallowed hard, a cold knot forming in her stomach. She didn't know how to respond without sounding difficult or sensitive. Instead, she just nodded quickly and began to read the first bullet point on her screen. She tried to focus, but her mind kept replaying his words. Was she overthinking it, or had he just crossed a professional boundary? Another 2 weeks flew by, and the project was moving at a fast pace. Maya tried to convince herself that the last meeting was just a one-off mistake. She poured all her energy into her work, hoping her professionalism would set the tone. But on a Thursday evening, things took a clear turn for the worse. They were having a late evening Zoom call to finalize the launch of a new ad campaign. The rest of the team had already disconnected, leaving just Maya and Harrison on the call. Maya adjusted her glasses and looked at her screen, ready to wrap up the conversation. "So, if we launch on Monday, we should see the first wave of data by Wednesday," she explained. Harrison wasn't looking at the data slides. He was looking directly at his webcam. "You look tired, Maya," his voice dropping to a lower, more intimate tone. "You work too hard. A beautiful woman like you shouldn't be spending her nights staring at spreadsheets." Maya felt her muscles instantly tense up, the familiar discomfort returning. "It's just part of the job, Harrison. I want to make sure this launch is flawless." Harrison chuckled, leaning closer to his camera with a slow wink. "If you keep delivering results like this, I might have to take you out to a private dinner to show my appreciation." The appreciation word hung heavily in the air, dripping with an implication that had nothing to do with marketing. Maya's heart raced as she struggled to find the right words. "I think the data speaks for itself," she managed to say, her voice shaking slightly. "I will send over the final files tonight. Have a good evening, Harrison." She quickly clicked the button to end the meeting, staring at her blank monitor in the dark room. There was no longer any doubt in her mind. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern of quiet harassment, and it was escalating. Maya barely slept that night, her mind racing with a million worst-case scenarios. If she spoke up and made Harrison angry, she risked losing the company as a client. Without this contract, she wouldn't be able to pay her rent or her assistant next month. The financial pressure felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. The next morning, she met her trusted mentor, Sarah, at a quiet coffee shop. Over hot mugs of coffee, Maya poured her heart out, detailing every uncomfortable comment Harrison had made. "I feel like I'm stuck," Maya admitted, staring down at her hands. "If I say something, I might destroy my business. But if I don't know how much longer I can take this." Sarah listened intently, her expression turning serious as she reached across the table to squeeze Maya's hand. "First of all, you are not overreacting," Sarah said firmly, validating her feelings. "But you need to realize that silence is also a choice, Maya. If you don't draw a line now, his behavior will only escalate, and it will destroy your peace of mind. A contract is never worth losing your dignity or your sense of safety." Maya swallowed hard, knowing Sarah was right. "But how do I stop him without losing the account?" Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah leaned in closer, her eyes sharp and focused. "You do it by being completely professional, completely factual, and leaving no room for negotiation. You don't have to be aggressive, but you do have to be firm." Maya walked back to her office with Sarah's words echoing in her mind. She realized that if she was going to handle this professionally, she needed to treat it like any other business problem. She could not rely on emotions or vague memories. She needed hard facts. She opened a private, secure document on her computer and took a deep breath. It was time to create a paper trail. She began to write down every single incident with absolute precision. She recorded the date, the exact time, and the specific words Harrison had used. She wrote down the context of the first comments during their weekly status update in the conference room. She detailed the late-night Zoom call, noting the exact phrase about a private dinner and the suggestive wink. She also documented her own responses, noting how she had tried to redirect the focus back to work. Looking at the list on her screen, Maya felt a strange sense of relief. Seeing the facts written down in black and white made her realize she wasn't crazy. This wasn't a series of harmless jokes. It was a documented pattern of inappropriate behavior. She knew that in the business world, written evidence was her strongest shield. If things went wrong, she would have an objective, factual record of everything that had happened. With her documentation secured, Maya felt the first spark of confidence return to her chest. She was no longer just a victim of uncomfortable comments. She was a business owner preparing to protect her agency. With her documentation secured, Maya knew her next step was the most critical. She had to prepare exactly what she was going to say. She sat at her desk, staring at a blank notebook, knowing she could not afford to get emotional or angry. If she sounded accusatory, Harrison would easily dismiss her as being too sensitive. If she was too soft, he would simply brush her off and continue his behavior. She needed a script that was professional, direct, and completely undeniable. She started writing, crossing out words and rewriting them until the tone was just right. She avoided phrases like, "you made me feel," and instead focused on professional boundaries. She crafted a soft but firm response designed to address the behavior while keeping the focus on their contract. Her final script was simple. "Harrison, I want to make sure we keep our relationship strictly focused on the deliverables of this project." She practiced saying it out loud in front of her office mirror, watching her posture and her facial expressions. She made sure to maintain steady eye contact, keeping her voice calm, even, and completely level. She repeated the words until they felt natural, erasing any trace of hesitation from her voice. She was not asking for permission, she was setting a professional boundary. By the time she closed her notebook, Maya felt a wave of calm wash over her. She had her facts, she had her plan, and she was ready to speak up. The day of their next weekly meeting arrived. Maya's heart was pounding, but she felt a strange, steady sense of calm. She walked into the glass-walled conference room and sat across from Harrison. Before she could even open her laptop, Harrison leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You know, Maya, you look incredibly sharp today," he began, his voice dropping to that familiar, suggestive tone. "We should really skip this boring status update and go grab a drink instead." This was the moment. Maya did not smile and she did not look down. She stopped him mid-sentence, raising her hand slightly to capture his attention. With steady eye contact and a calm, level voice, she delivered her prepared script. "Harrison, I really value this project and our partnership," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "But I need us to keep our conversations strictly focused on the deliverables. Comments about my appearance make me uncomfortable, and they are not professional." The silence that followed was heavy and immediate. The playful smile completely vanished from Harrison's face. Maya sat perfectly still, holding his gaze without blinking or apologizing. She had drawn the line in the sand. The air in the room felt freezing cold as Harrison stared at Maya. His jaw tightened, and he shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair. "Whoa, Maya, calm down," he said, waving his hand as if to dismiss her words. "It was just a joke. You really need to lighten up. I was just trying to be friendly, but clearly you took it the wrong way." Maya felt a sudden urge to apologize, to say she was sorry for making things awkward, but she remembered Sarah's advice and held her ground. She did not let her voice shake, and she did not back down. "I understand you didn't mean any harm, Harrison," she replied, keeping her tone completely neutral. "But moving forward, I want to make sure we keep our relationship strictly professional. Now, let's look at the launch schedule for next week." Harrison stared at her for a few seconds, searching her face for any sign of weakness. He found none. With a tight nod, he looked down at his tablet, his playful attitude completely gone. "Fine," he muttered, his voice cold. "Let's look at the schedule." Maya opened her laptop, her fingers steady as she clicked on the presentation. The tension in the room was thick, but she had successfully held her boundary without raising her voice.
Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere in their meetings was noticeably different. The atmosphere was quiet and highly professional, with no more casual remarks or personal comments. Harrison kept his focus entirely on the screens and the project spreadsheets. He was polite but distant, treating Maya with the same objective respect he showed his other senior consultants. Maya did not let the cold tension affect the quality of her work. In fact, she worked harder than ever to ensure the campaign's launch was a massive success. She delivered every report early, and her marketing strategies exceeded their target goals by 20%. She proved week after week that her boundaries did not diminish her competence or her commitment. During their weekly status updates, they spoke only of target demographics, click-through rates, and budget allocations. Maya felt a profound sense of peace returning to her daily work life. She no longer had to prepare herself for uncomfortable moments before opening her email or joining a call. Setting that boundary had cleared the air, creating a healthy distance that allowed her to focus entirely on her craft. She had successfully protected her dignity while continuing to deliver flawless results for the company. The final launch of the marketing campaign was a massive, undeniable success. The project wrapped up smoothly, and the company's brand was now the talk of the industry. Maya sat in the conference room one last time, preparing her final performance report. Harrison walked in, carrying a folder of paperwork, and sat down opposite her. Instead of his usual cold distance, his expression was serious but genuinely appreciative. "The board is thrilled with these numbers, Maya," Harrison said, sliding a contract renewal across the mahogany table. "We want to secure your agency's services for another 12 months with a 30% increase in your budget." Maya looked at the contract, a wave of pride and relief washing over her. "Thank you, Harrison," she said, keeping her tone warm but completely professional. Harrison stood up and offered his hand, giving her a firm, respectful handshake. "You are a true professional, Maya. I look forward to continuing our partnership." As Maya walked out of the building and into the bright city sunshine, she took a deep, free breath. She had done the impossible. She had protected her personal boundaries, kept her dignity, and secured her biggest client. Setting boundaries didn't cost her the contract. It had earned her the respect she deserved and saved her business. She had stood her ground, and her career was stronger than ever.
What a powerful journey for Maya. She proved that you don't have to choose between your career and your self-respect. By setting a calm, professional boundary, she actually earned Harrison's respect and secured an even bigger contract. It shows us that standing our ground is always worth it. Now it's your turn to practice. We covered some incredibly useful business English phrases today, like to hold your ground, to draw a line, and moving forward. You can find all the vocabulary of the story down below in the description box. If you found Maya's story helpful, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with a friend who is working hard on their English. Thank you so much for watching. Keep practicing, and I will see you in the next story. Goodbye.